Hi guys, welcome to Outpost 18. My name's Liam. This is Darklight Memento Mori, and today we're going to be looking at the Black Knight Accursed character and the different build options available for it. I really like the Black Knight. It's actually the first character I tried to use in Darklight. Sadly at the time it was the first time I played the game and I completely screwed up this character, and as a result I found it quite a boring character to play. It also doesn't help that the character itself doesn't really have any special abilities, so you don't have this fancy lark that the Exorcist has or the Blood Witch has and the Necromancer, that kind of thing. He's pretty vanilla, he's quite simple to use. There's not too much complexity going on with him. However, there are quite a few different paths you can take with him, and so you need to be careful that you choose the correct path for your playstyle, otherwise you may not get on with this character. Looking at the stats, so he starts off with 2 melee attacks which hit on the 4+, which is really good. It's kind of on par with the Revenant. However, he has 1 ranged attack which hits on the 5+, so that's not as good as the Revenant. But it has a belt size of 3, which is very good. The initiative is low, sadly, it's 3. For that reason, I suggest you get the tattoo that gives you +2 to initiative really early. I think it's called the City of Lucernia, or Lucrenia, depends how you pronounce it. You can find that at the tattooist, so get that straight away so you can bump it up to a 5. You could take a lantern as well, get it up to 7, but you want to get a bit higher than 3 so that you can try and dispatch some of the demons standing in front of you, try and reduce the amount of attacks going back at you. Movement is 4, that's average. Health is phenomenal at 16, that's really good, but the sanity is a bit low with 5. He also starts with a broken sword, which is okay, it's not amazing or anything, but I believe it does cleave, and 1 consumable. So stat wise, got a strength of 4, which is excellent, perception 3, mind value is poor, which is 2, so this chappie does suffer a bit in the sanity department. If you come across faceless ones and stuff like that, he can go a bit crazy quite quickly, so try and look for some things that will help you out there, like the Helm of Nightmares, if you can find that, that's brilliant on this guy, or some tentacles which help you sort out your sanity mid-game. Otherwise you're going to be going down to the pub after every single game and drinking alcohol to try and get your sanity back. Charisma's 3, which is good, agility's 3, good, and endurance is 4, which is exceptionally good. So he generates a lot of stamina, and you'll use stamina with this guy quite a lot. I would suggest you focus on armour and not evasion. Yes, evasion is useful, but armour's the way to go on this guy, absolutely. Every time you can get his armour up really high, and you'll get into a position where actually a lot of attacks won't even hurt you. If demons aren't putting out 2d6 damage, then they just simply won't scratch you. So he is super tanky if you deck him out with armour, so worth doing that. I'd probably steer clear of the armour though that reduces your agility. Some of the really heavy armours and shields and things, I think, reduce your agility. I don't think that's a particularly good idea, and you don't need to go down that route really. So those are the stats. Skills, oh, and he has, I think I mentioned earlier, he has no special rules, there's just nothing there, so unfortunately that makes the character a little bit bland, so you have to be careful that you get the skills right, otherwise it can be a bit dull, as in you can just be throwing 1 and 2 dice a turn doing your attacks, and if they miss then you skip over your go and it's on to the rest of the crew and you're just watching them doing funky things. So you've got to get the build on this right, otherwise if you're fighting in a group it might be a bit uninteresting. This guy could possibly go it alone if you filled up his belt with bandages and whatnot, but whilst he's super tough, he will not clear swathes and swathes of demons rapidly like the Outcast or some of the other characters, so it would be but he could potentially do it. So I'm going to talk about the skills I particularly like first of all, which I think make this character more interesting. They're not necessarily the most powerful skills, but they're probably going to make the character more engaging because he's probably going to do more. So probably the first one you want to go for is combat stance, which is level 1 skill. Basically you can go on an offensive or defensive stance. So the defensive stance will gain you +1 armour, but your strength goes down by 1, and the defensive stance, if we turn the card around, you gain +1 strength. Sorry, the offensive stance you gain +1 strength, but you suffer -1 to your armour. So it's quite nice because you can adjust the defence or the strength of your character on the fly each turn. You want to get as much strength into this character as possible because you will absolutely need it. So he starts off on 4, sink a couple of levels into that when you can, get it up to 6. Plus that is going to take you to 7 on offensive stance, and then you pile on your weapon and you're going to have to get yourself 2d6 damage somehow. Just having one weapon which does d6 damage won't be enough, so you're going to have to bump that up. One really good weapon, if you're going to go single-handed, which this set of skills I'm about to go through does, then a silver sword is an excellent item to take because it does 1d6 damage +2 damage, and it has cleave. So that's good. If you add it onto a base strength of 6 or 7 with offensive stance and a couple of level increases, you could be doing 1d6 +9. And it also does an extra damage against demons, so you could do 1d6 +10 potentially quite easily. But the beauty of this is because it's a stock item at the market, you can go smith that up. So yes, there are much better single-handed weapons that you'll find in the rare loot deck, like the Vanguard Blade for example, which never misses. But those magical items you can't smith because they already have magical properties. This you can. So you can go put demonite, gold and some money into this and get yourself an extra d6 damage versus demons, so you could have 2d6 +10, and I think that's probably where you want to be if you're going to go down the single-handed route. You need to be killing things. Now the reason for the single-handed route, I think, is because you can take parry. Now if you have a shield, so get him a shield. Don't make it too heavy, just go for like a medium grade shield, and you'll find out why in a minute. If you have a shield equipped, you may parry instead of evading. So for this reason, don't bother with any evasion, just sink it all into armour. So you can parry instead of evading, immediate attack. So parry roll, you roll a d6 and you consult the following table. So if you've got a light shield, you parry on a 3+. Medium 4+, I suggest going for the 4+, 50-50. Heavy shield is 5+, and the heavy shields can sometimes affect or potentially affect agility. I think I know helmets do, possibly shields as well. So go middle of the road on this because you do want to get some benefits from holding the shield, some decent armor points, and also you could go smith the shield up as well and put some extra magical properties onto it. So if you are successful on your dice roll, you completely negate the attack. Just kills the attack, gone, like it never happened. Now you could argue that, well, if I've got tons of evasion, then okay, I might get hit more, but the damage will be minimal, like 1 point of health, maybe 2, so why should I gamble on that? I would still gamble on it nonetheless, because just negating the attack is brilliant, but also if you go for the riposte skill, which is level 3, if your parry is successful, you may also immediately deal 1 melee attack with your currently equipped weapon, no cleaving allowed, against the one who attacked you with +1 to hit. So you're going to be hitting on 3+ a return attack because someone hit you and they screwed up. This card allows you to generate so many more attacks with the Black Knight, so your 2 attacks can then escalate quite rapidly when you're getting surrounded and getting hit and you're parrying. So definitely worth doing that. Just want to check parry again, make sure there's no stamina requirements. Oh, there is, okay, because you basically parry instead of evading, and when you evade you spend a point of stamina. But you've got 4 endurance, so you have lots of stamina anyway. You might want to increase your endurance by 1, give you another armed point, give you more stamina to play with, so you can basically parry more and riposte more. Alternatively, I think there's a tattoo Hecrophant or something, which I think it gives you extra stamina points. But anyway, if you go down that route with a decent sword, silver sword, smith it up, you can contribute quite heavily if you're on the front line, because otherwise all you're getting is 2 attacks a turn, and I don't think it's until level 4 that you generate another melee attack. So get those skills, get to level 4, doing 3 melee attacks and all your riposting, and then suddenly the game becomes more interesting because you're throwing a lot more dice around the table, and your turn lasts longer because you're becoming more involved and not just watching the other characters do all their flashy things. Also at level 5 you get Master Warrior. This skill is just awesome, period, so regardless of what route you go down, melee attacks will now hit on a 3+, so combine that with your riposte, which gives you +1 to hit. You're going to be returning attacks on a 2+, so you'll just be trashing things that try to attack you 50% of the time, provided you parry, obviously. You could go for a lighter shield and increase those odds, but that's up to you at the end of the day. But I really like the parry and riposte. That's probably the route I would go down. There are some other routes, and they're certainly not bad, they're just very different. So if you want to go down the dual wielding route, you have ambidextrous, so you no longer suffer the -1 to hit penalty when making dual wield attacks, so that's extremely good. And remember, if you do dual wield, you can get your damage up frighteningly high. I mean, if you had a couple of silver swords and smith those up, you could maybe get up to 4d6 damage, plus strength and other bonuses, offensive stance, so that could be quite frightening if you choose to go down that route. But you will lose your access to the parry and riposte. There's also deflect, which is level 2 skills, so by holding a weapon in each hand you'll gain +1 evasion. That's okay, and if you're not parrying then you'll probably benefit from evasion, but if you are going to go down this parry and riposte route, just don't bother with evasion whatsoever, you won't need it. And if you're level 5 you get a bonus of +2 evasion instead. So if you're going to dual wield, those two are definitely worth going for in conjunction with the Master Warrior, which is going to let you hit on the 3+. So they're good, but for the reasons I've stated earlier, I personally prefer the parry and riposte. There's also, you can go down the double-handed weapon route, and if you're going to do that, you've got Battle Master at level 4, so you ignore the -1 penalty of most two-handed weapons. I said double-handed earlier, I shouldn't have said that, it is two-handed. And there are lots of two-handed weapons you can go buy from the marketplace, and you'll also find some. I think you've even got like Cloud's a Buster Sword, is it, in the rare items deck, colossal thing, which you can go pick up. It's an enormous looking blade. So you could maybe get something like that if you're lucky. Just remember to bump up your strength a bit, which you'll probably be doing anyway, because you need to put out damage with this guy, but a lot of those meaty swords do require higher strength. So just pay attention to that. Also, Whirlwind at level 4 requires you to use a two-handed weapon that can cleave. You'll cleave, well, you can cleave or may cleave even when you don't kill your target, so long as you don't miss. That is epic. It's so good, and it's probably the sole reason to entertain a two-handed weapon build, because frankly you can probably potentially put out more damage with the dual wielding branch of skills by getting up to like 46 damage. However, the fact that you can just cleave through even if you don't kill stuff is immense. So that's really, really good. I still prefer the parry and riposte routes, but that's purely because I want to be playing a character where I've got quite a lot of play time and I'm just not watching other people do their thing all the time. But you've got those 3 routes. We've then got these ones are interesting. You've got off guard, so if you evade and take no damage, so I don't think it's going to work with the parry and riposte routes, but so one hand and shield, I don't think it's going to work so well with this. But if you evade and take no damage by the end of a melee attack, you may trip your opponent prone by spending their stamina. Now it doesn't sound immediately particularly exciting, but when you stack it up with this, Ruthless, level 4, when attacking a prone character you deal an extra d6 damage. That is quite good, so you can be holding, you know, a colossal double-handed sword, trip up your opponent, and then you're piling on an extra d6 damage. That's really, really good, but it's kind of reliant on your first attack. Oh no, this is reliant on evading, isn't it? So if you evade and take no damage by the end of the melee attack, you may trip your opponent. So you can trip them up out of turn, and a lot of them are going to go before you because the Black Knight's initiative isn't great. So that actually works quite well. They fight you, trip them up, and then basically you stab them whilst on the floor. That's not a bad route to go down. So sword and shield, big colossal two-handed weapon, or dual wielding, they're all valid paths to take. I guess it depends on your playstyle, but you need the right weapon. You absolutely have to have the right weapon. And don't try and mix these paths, just pick one, otherwise you'll end up not really specialising in anything really. These ones, what are we going to go through? Let's go through these ones, a few miscellaneous ones. So Heartless, whenever you kill an enemy, restore 1 spent stamina. That's really good, especially if you're going to go down like the dual wielding routes, because if you're putting out 4d6 damage, and maybe you're tripping them over and putting out 5d6 damage on the floor, you're probably going to kill them, in which case you're going to get stamina back with that, so that's quite nice. Target practice, your ranged attacks hit on the 4+. I don't think you'd have a need for that, frankly. I think this character is a melee character. I suppose it doesn't hurt to have a backup crossbow in case you're playing in a group and you're out of position, and there's not a lot you can do, or for reasons unknown, you're at the other end of the corridor and you need to shoot something. It might be useful, but I don't think it's worth it. I think there are better skills out there, so I'm going to put this on in a separate pile over here. And then you've got Determination, allows you to reroll a melee attack dice by spending 1 stamina. Cannot be used on cleave attacks. It's a shame you can't use it on cleave attacks, otherwise I would take it every time, but it's decent. It might be worth considering. Having a reroll is really, really useful. Then we've got Brawler, so during the attack phase spend 1 stamina to taunt. Every target turns to face you, or every target adjacent to you turns to face you. And you will gain +1 armour against their attacks until the start of your next turn. It's okay if you want to save the necks of the rest of the characters in your party, I suppose. You can elect to take the brunt of all the attacks, and I suppose if you've tooled your Black Knight up with armour, in particular if you're going down the parry and riposte route with a sword and shield, this can be useful. It can take the heat off the rest of the players in the group. It's also extremely useful for the Revenant because he can then use his backstab more frequently, because they'll be targeting you and not the Revenant. So it's kind of it's a party pleaser, that one. I'd maybe consider that at later levels. I'll probably sort yourself out first, and that sounds a bit selfish, but the Black Knight doesn't have tons of fancy rules, so you need to maximise the damage output from the cards that you have access to. These I do like, so those are some miscellaneous cards there. I do like these ones. Now bearing in mind you can only use one consumable a turn, and the Black Knight has quite a decent belt size of 3. He's probably going to want some bandages to keep himself going. Now you've got quick hands. You have 2 additional belt spaces and can now use 2 consumables a turn. So you'll have a belt size of 5 and can use 2 a turn. So chucking out oil flasks, using bandages all in the same turn, or blessed water vials and stuff is good, because when things do hit the fan in Darklight, suddenly consumables can be the difference between life and death. Just being able to toss out an oil flask or 2 oil flasks and a blessed water or something in a single turn is epic, so that's really nice. Resourceful, you may carry 4 additional consumables. Have I read that right? You now have 2 additional belt spaces and may now use 2 consumables per turn. That's quick hands. And resourceful, you may carry 4 additional consumables with you. Okay, so you can carry tons basically, and you can use 2 a turn. So I quite like those. They're kind of skills I'd take at later levels once you've got the basics down pat and you're happy with your damage. But those are quite nice. We've got the charge route here, which is interesting, but it's very situational. So charge is level 1. If you melee attack in the same turn as you have moved, your first attack hits on a 1. So if we take the silver sword, you would have 1d6 plus 2 damage, plus 1 against demons, plus your strength of 4, up that couple of levels to 6 maybe. So you've got 1d6 plus 6, 7, 8, 9 maybe against damage. So 1d6 plus 9. 2 attacks hitting on a 4 plus. 3 attacks hitting on a 4 plus when you get to level 4. And this, if you're running, is going to then make you, those 3 attacks are going to hit on a 3 plus. So that's nice. I mean, you could even, rather than putting an extra d6 damage on the silver sword, you could go for the plus 1 to hit. So you could potentially get yourself into a position where you're hitting on a 2 plus, but you won't be putting out as much damage. So you've got to decide what's more useful, I guess. And then you've got forceful. Your skill charge will also deal plus 1d6 damage. So that might lend itself to actually putting plus 1 hit onto your silver sword. Go smith it, because you'll pick up a d6 extra damage from that. Because you can only smith an item once basically. You smith it again, you lose the previous property, and you can only smith items from the marketplace. So if you find a magical item, you can't smith it, unfortunately. So that's interesting. However, you've got to kind of work out how often can you charge. Because his initiative is low and the monsters are probably going to be moving first, they're going to be right next to you. So in that circumstance, you can't charge, and therefore these charging skills are completely useless and redundant. However, if you're fighting in a group, you may be in a position where there's a little bit of space created by things like the courtesan, who can be on the front line and then move back. She might create some gappage for you. Necroblades might create a bit of space from the necromancer, or other things, undead champions or whatever. They might just allow you to hang back a space and then you can go charging in, and then that's quite good. But it is a bit situational, so I think that depends. The charging route for me depends on your tactics as a group. If you're playing solo, I just wouldn't bother with this, because you're going to get surrounded and you won't be able to move. Then we have shove. So by spending 2 stamina before your movement, and that's a high cost because the Black Knight kind of needs his stamina for tumbling when you're like fighting those big demons which are kicking out 2d6, 3d6 damage, or even 4d6. You'll want your stamina for that, and you'll want it for doing the old parry trick. But regardless, by spending 2 stamina before your movement phase, you'll initiate a shove. During this movement phase, you may step into the squares occupied by other characters and move them to one adjacent free square, even in the one you are leaving. So, it's a difficult one because it allows you to push further forwards, but I'm not sure you want to push much beyond the front line, because then you start to lose the support of your comrades if you're in a party. However, if you went in a bit deeper, I suppose it then gives you more cleave options, because sometimes cleave is cut a little short by the people or allies standing around you, so maybe it'd work in that situation if you want to push deeper and then you've got a really good cleave going. It's not one I would take. I think it's going to get you into trouble, but maybe you could make that work with a certain build type. And you've got Unstoppable. You may now move up to twice your movement value when you shove, well, that's just going to take you further into the pit of Acheron. So I don't know about those two. I would probably drop those into the poop pile. So yeah, just to recap, you've got those 3 paths. You've got the dual wielding, you've got the sword and shield parry riposting, which I really like. You've got the double-handed route as well, and you've got some quite nice miscellaneous skills like the belt management stuff, and those other ones like Heartless, Determination and Brawler. So they're interesting. But yeah, it really depends on your playstyle really, but if I were you, I would go down, so if it's your first time playing the Black Knight, I would probably suggest the parry and riposte route, just so you can get more attacks going or return attacks on top of your standard 2 or 3 attacks that you're going to be putting out, and go with that, because he has no additional skills. There's nothing fancy going on with this guy. He's just a wall if you armour him up, and then he chucks out a few attacks every turn, so sadly it's not particularly exciting. For that reason, if you want to make him a bit more exciting, you could maybe look at trying to give him access to spells in some way. So I know if you stick a gem into things, you can turn items into catalyst items, I think. Just have a quick look at this. So, where is it? 1 gem, type melee or ranged, items gain the catalyst. It's a shame you can't put it into armour, because if you could put a gem into like your shield or something and make that a catalyst, that'd be quite good. But you can't, you have to put it into a melee or ranged weapon. And putting a gem into your melee item means that you can't then get that extra 1d6 versus demons, or you can't get the +1 to hit. So that's a bit of a sacrifice, unfortunately, if you go down that route. But you could maybe gem up his weapon, and then you get access to spells. Otherwise, you're going to be holding a catalyst item if you're offhand, and then you don't get the dual wielding, you don't get the double handed weapon, and you don't get the sword and shield parry and riposte, so it kind of takes all the good stuff away from you. So spellcasting with this guy is a bit tricky, unless maybe you can find some other item which doesn't go in your hand that gives you the catalyst ability. Because then you could go for some low grade spells like manipulation, which I've talked about a lot. It's very easy to cast and it's really good. So you could do things like that. Anyway, that's my review of the Black Knight. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon.